It's the Extra Point Podcast from Arizona's family.
Well, it continues this weekend in the NFC Championship game. The legend of Brock Purdy. Can the Perry Puma alumni, the story that started right here on the high school football gridiron, continue? And can Brock Purdy lead the San Francisco 49ers to the Super Bowl in his hometown? Let's get a perspective of a man who knows him very well, Dan Manucci, who trained him up to the quarterback he is today. Dan, great to see you here on the Extra Point.
Mark, always great to be here at the Extra Point and talk about a young man that you talk about a phenomenal story. I mean, all through high school, training him through high school and training him through college when he'd make it home maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time, from Iowa State, and getting a chance to work with him in the off season after his combine work and the combine, and to have him home for a week at a time, train him, and he'd go to mini camp and then come back and go to another mini camp and come back to the OTAs. But having a chance to watch this young man grow and to watch this young man in reference to how hard he's worked to get where he's at, and to watch him mark through 46, for a lot of the scouts out there that are watching the Extra Point, you guys missed on this. The guy had 46 regular season games. He broke every other and then some passing records at Iowa State. By the way, he was the MVP of the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon versus another one of my quarterbacks, and Tyler Shuck, who was at Oregon at the time. And now this past year, Tyler at Texas Tech, who, by the way, got the MVP in the Tex Act Bowl this last year. Mark, you being an ex-quarterback out of Texas and whatnot, what were they not seeing to allow him to drop to Mr. Irrelevant in the 7th round? I don't know, but I think sometimes, Mark, as you know, a lot of quarterbacks, these scouts, these so-called scouts, put too much emphasis on the tangibles versus the intangibles that Brock Purdy brought to Iowa State. He's a winner. He produces. He is a guy that wins year in and year out. And I, quite frankly, thank God the 49ers saw all that, the little diatribe I had, and won Brock Purdy to snatch him up as the very last pick in the 7th round.
No, I love a good Manucci diatribe. Full disclosure, by the way, was a starting quarterback for a hot second in 8th grade and got beat out by JoJo Pollard. So I was the flanker, running out routes and throwing chop blocks, and that's kind of how I made my way in football. But enough about me. Let's talk about the legend of Brock Purdy. If I would have told you this time last year, after the season, he's getting ready for the combine, Brock Purdy would be leading the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game, you would have told me.
I just said, put the ganja pipe down, number one. I got to tell you what, Mark. You know what's interesting, because people say that, did you see any of this coming? I saw him going to a team and making a team, whomever that would be. And I, quite frankly, was telling people he should go between the 3rd and maybe 5th round because of what I just said earlier about all the things he did at Iowa State, his athletic ability, his arm, his timing, what have you. But I just said, wow, if you'd have took me back to the future and said Brock's going to be leading the San Francisco 49ers to the NFC Championship game, I said, wait a second. Did Jimmy G go back over to Greece for some reason and go see his ancestors? Trey Lance went back to North Dakota State and said, I'm gonna give it up and go farm. And then we got Brock Purdy out and said, no way. But it doesn't surprise me that the way he's playing, Mark, the way he's playing does not surprise me in all the things he's doing, because we've seen this before. We saw it at Perry High School, as you alluded to. We saw it at Iowa State. And now we're seeing it too. So I always figure once you get your chance to just make the team, and then at that point, if you get your opportunity, I felt you would be fine. But to answer your question, to go back in the future of January of 2022, I just said, well, wow, wake me up when the dream's over, because right now, don't wake me up.
So what was he thinking this time last year? Did he come back? Was he in the lab working out with you? And what kind of stuff was he working on to get ready for professional football?
You know what? After he graduated, he went back to Florida, and he worked out with a group of guys back there, trainers, quarterback coach. I think it's the same guys that Trevor Lawrence went and worked out with when he got ready for his combine. And the biggest thing for Brock was to go back there, get ready for all the drills, the running, the shuttle, work on his mechanics, really work on him driving the right shoulder, the right hip, and then just getting ready mentally for a lot of the things that they're going to be doing. I had a chance to talk to him a few times when he was back there, and he told me what they were doing and how they were doing. And I also said, well, work on a couple of these things here and there. So when he got to the combine, he was, quote unquote, combine ready to throw for all of the drills that they have, and for the mental side as well, too. And so he was probably gone for a good month to 2 months, I believe. And then he came back, got drafted. About 2 days after the draft, he came out, we worked out, and then he had to go up to San Francisco, and then he had to go do the Mr. Irrelevant parade and the surfing and the dinner and all that kind of stuff. So he really worked really hard to get himself ready, mechanically sound, mentally sound, and physically sound to go to that combine. And quite frankly, I think he impressed a lot of people. What I heard is that they were surprised at what they saw in Brock Purdy. And I'm like, well, again, I think he was under-scouted. Don't get me started on another diatribe now, Mark. But I just think that he really worked hard in the offseason. And then once the draft hit, he was home off and on. And every time he was home, we worked 2 or 3 times to really hone him in, to really dial him in, and get him ready for training camp. And quite frankly, Mark, by the time he left here, it was either late July, and went over to training camp. He was dialed in. We were working out over Tumbleweed Park, over at Bell Bank Park on the indoors, the outdoors. He was working out. He and Chubba was home from Nebraska, getting him ready. And just by the time he left, I said, look, you're ready. You are ready to go. All you got to do is just focus, study. Every day is an audition to the National Football League, Mark, even if you make it. I felt that way in Buffalo, that every time I showed up, I was auditioning to stay and be that backup. And his whole thing was he was so mentally and physically prepared with the workouts we were doing that it was like, this kid's ready to go. And I just told him, look, I don't mind saying when he showed up, and I said, congratulations. I said, look, irrelevant. I said, irrelevant my you-know-what. I'll say irrelevant my ass. You're ready to go, man. You are ready to go. And he had that fire in his belly, bound and determined to go make that team. And Mark, he's the kind of guy, the legend continues of he's not going to wear that on his sleeve, that he's irrelevant. He went along with it. He had fun. That he's just focused and dialed in to just go prove that he belongs, not so much to prove people wrong, just to prove that he belongs and he's earned this right to be where he's at. Now starting, hey, sometimes fate gets in the way, doesn't it? And you just take advantage of it.
No, you do, and I mean, I don't know that you could have predicted this at all, but it definitely is part of the Brock Purdy story to have the 2 top guys go down and he gets his shot and he seizes the opportunity. And I think back, I was in Mexico City watching the Niners play the Cardinals, and he had his running back go the wrong way, and it just kind of looked like, okay, he's a rookie, and then a couple weeks later he's in the NFC Championship game. Is this the best story that you've seen from one of your quarterbacks?
Well, absolutely. I think I look at Bryce Perkins, who made the LA Rams. Bryce is doing a good job there, making the team. I look at Tyler Shuck. Tyler was at Oregon, and he gracefully, he moved on to Texas Tech. I think he got a raw deal there, but he'll never tell you that. He's done a great job there. I think of Dalton Sneed, coming from Horizon High School, going to UNLV and not working out. Having to go to a JUCO before he goes to Montana and breaks records. Kind of the same thing with Bryce Perkins. Goes to ASU, goes there, wasn't working out, broke his neck, and to get that healed up, goes to Arizona Western College, then goes on to UVA and has a great career there, and is now with the Rams. But look at Ty Thompson at Oregon, young man out of Mesquite High School, who's hanging in there, doing a good job of just kind of weathering the storm. Because now Bo Nix coming back for another year. So I guess when I look at Brock, I went, wow, this really tops it off. But for every one of those young men, the common denominator that makes me feel good, Mark, is that how they handled everything with grace. They took the high road. They continued to persevere and endure, to stay the course. And I tell these guys, you just keep working your butt off. Ignore the noise. stuff is going to happen. As you know, as that outstanding quarterback you were in the 8th grade, things are going to happen. You just have to get back up, call the next play, and move on. But here's what I always tell guys, Mark. Understand why you got sacked. Understand why you threw the pick before you move on to the next play. But Brock, by far, this is one of those stories. And quite frankly, I think this will go down in the annals of the National Football League as one of the greatest football stories of all time, that Brock has taken this 7 wins in a row, rookie quarterback in the NFC Championship game. And if he takes him to the Super Bowl, wins the Super Bowl, they might put a statue of him, and not only at Perry High School, San Francisco. Hell, I'll put a statue out in front of my house of one Brock Purdy, if you will.
Yeah, people at the newsroom say that I want to put one in the sports department. I mean, I've been banging the drum about this since 2017 when we showed up to watch him play. I mean, he had the great play at the end of the Hamilton game in 2016 to win it in overtime, and I think he had mono, and so he was under recruited. But so we showed up in the fall of 2017, and I mean, the chains, they not only moved, but it was like a lightning strike, just bam, bam, bam. Yeah. I mean, just chunk play after chunk play. The ball was out quick. It was just like, this is football. And it was like when Bruce Arians was talking about the same thing, the quarterback hits his back foot, the ball's out. I mean, that was beautiful to watch, and it's really kind of hard to watch bad football after you watch good football.
Well, here's the thing. We've been seeing it. You've been seeing all of us here, and you know, with me training him and covering the games on the AIA radio network, doing his broadcasts, and then that playoff game again, seeing Tyler Shuck and Tyler Shuck and Brock Purdy part 2, and Brock win that playoff game and move on to the state finals, and then to see them again in the Fiesta Bowl and Brock win that one as well too. But a lot of the plays and a lot of similar scenarios you're seeing that we saw in high school and college, you're seeing with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, maybe not as much, but the one thing I've told Brock, and I think his coaches, I know his dad has too, is, you know, if all else fails and breaks down, make a play. He's a winner. He knows how to make a play. He takes care of the ball, doesn't throw it into coverage. And you know what? I always say, hey, he's taking good sacks. Guys, what do you mean he took a good sack? Well, there's a couple times things broke down, he just took the sack, or he threw it away. Sometimes you just take, you live for another down. I think that's the mantra. And I've told people, you got to take care of the ball. My very first day in Buffalo, I arrived. The quarterbacks are there. Chuck Knox, God rest his soul, outstanding head coach. Number 1, take care of the ball. Number 2, take care of the ball. And number 3, take care of the ball. And number 4, guess what? On 4th down, it's okay to punt. So not that it's too conservative, just play within your game. But Brock's game's expanded because how quick he is, how elusive it is. And then, Mark, I've said this to many people. He sees the field like a running back. His eyes are up. I always preach, keep your eyes up, Brock. All the quarterbacks, keep your eyes up. If there's somebody downfield, you can hit them, and then take it. Get your eyes up because you'll hit a big play. Don't temper your enthusiasm to go make a play. But guess what? If you keep your eyes up and you see somebody throw it to him, bang, you got a big play. So he's taking care of the ball. But we've seen this act. I think I compare this to all of a sudden, here's Brock Purdy that's been in a road troupe doing acting around all these cities around the U.S. Pretty successful. All of a sudden, they call him into Broadway theater. They decide to get one Brock Purdy for this big show on Broadway called Chicago. And he's the backup for the lead actor. The lead actor goes down. They insert Brock Purdy in. Guy can sing, he can dance. He does everything on the bright lights of Broadway. And that's how I look at the NFL. And now he's under the bright lights of San Francisco versus Broadway. He's prepared. He's ready to go. And then the rest of the nation sees him like those other cities saw him, whether it's playing football or part of an acting troupe or whatever it is. That's kind of the analogy I say. He's honed his skills. He's ready to go. The lead actor went down. He's the backup. Well, basically, he Wally pipped that lead actor and is moving forward on the bright stage of Broadway.
And, we were looking at, and that's a great analogy, by the way. That's we ought to make shirts, Brock on Broadway. There's a lot of Brock shirts out there right now.
It's that Kansas State education, Mark, that seems to come through the McClintock and K-State education that tends to ooze through once in a while.
K-State always beats Texas. You guys have been torturing us ever since you joined the Big 12. I'm happy to leave. But we move on more. Brock. We look at the NFL Combine, and we were pulling the tape the other day from his Combine, from him running the Combine. I think he ran a 4.7, and Joe Ferris, our crack editor, who's just on it, and he's great, and he says, look at your script. Your script says he ran a 4.7, but it seems like he runs a lot faster when people are chasing him. And you mentioned his eyes. He sees the field like a running back. So what did scouts miss here with Brock Purdy?
I think they miss the intangibles that he's a winner. Look at the Oklahoma game a couple years ago against Jalen Hurts, brought that team back. He's consistently consistent, good timing, puts the ball where it's supposed to be. But I really think that they forgot to measure his heart. If there's one thing they forget at that Combine, there's no tape measure for your heart. His heart, his winning attitude, his leadership capabilities, that's what they miss. If they look at the tape and see this young man, I mean, I'm sitting there watching the Combine, and they show the first 2 or 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and then they would cut the break or go somewhere else before I could watch Brock throw at the Combine. I'm like, guys, you're missing out. But you know what? That's part of the story, Mark. It's everybody leaving him out. Yeah, he's a nice quarterback. He's quick, and yeah, he broke a lot of records. Iowa State, you know what I mean? Just that downplaying of who he is, and he's bound and determined. So I think the one thing I look at these Combines is they measure too many tangibles versus the intangibles. And he did very well in his interviews. If there's one thing, a lot of guys say he did very well in his interviews. They were impressed with his interviews, his poise, his moxie. And on top of that, Mark, he's mature for his age. He's an old soul. I say that. He's an old soul. He's very mature. And he's a young man that is bound and determined. He knows what he wants to do that. Whether you like it or not, he's going to succeed, whether he was the 3rd round or the 7th round, irrelevant. And I think that's the one thing a lot of these scouts miss at these Combines.
All right, take me back to, 17 was his last year, so like 2013, 2012. You've got the lab going out at one of the Valley Parks, and a young Brock Purdy rolls up carrying a football. Did you say to yourself, hey, that's the next quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers right there?
Yeah. Well, number one, I'm glad he was on time. And number two, that I knew is, going into his sophomore year and his junior year, that you heard about how this kid played a lot, his sophomore year off and on as a sophomore and on varsity. So when he came out, I heard about him. His dad called and said, would you look to take Brock on and train him? I said, sure, bring him out. And there's a lot of things that I think that he realized he had to accomplish if he was going to take his game to the next level. And then taking that game to the next level, we did a lot of footwork. I had to use his body. He used to throw, and when he throw on the run, he'd jump. And I'd say, you got to keep your feet down. You ain't got wings. Can't be flying out here. Little stuff like that to get his attention. And at the time, he was coming off of baseball. He had baseball, football, him throwing a spiral on a consistent basis. So he worked on that, his feet, his body, getting his feet set up. He'd step left and throw right. So just getting him basically, Mark, aligned basic fundamentals, mechanics, base, footwork, throwing the ball, where to throw the ball. He was very receptive to hearing it from a guy that's been there and done that, and a guy like myself that's been to the mountaintop and has seen over the mountaintop what you need to do if you're going to be that junior year of varsity. This is all the stuff you got to do. In the meantime, he got mono before the start of the junior season. So he came back out. We got him back up to speed, got his heart rate up, and because he was weak, and we got him going again. But when he came out, and he bring Chuba, his brother, out too, I think it was he and his brother, just Brock in particular, both of them, to get used to practicing at that tempo, that pace, and being consistent in everything you do on every throw, not taking a throw off, which he never really did. But understanding is not to just go through the process we're going through, but to grow through that process. And I tell guys, all this stuff that we do out here, don't loathe it, don't get bored with it, perfect it. Be the best you can be, because you get in the game, and I guarantee you, Mark, a lot of the stuff the quarterbacks I train, a lot of stuff that he's done this year, he's done that on the football field, on the training that we've done, as far as footwork, rolling left, pulling up left, throwing back right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. That throw, for example, I'll give you this. The move drill we do, it's a drill where you go left, you go right, you got to pull up, hit somebody here, here, and here. Well, that throw to Ayuk in the Seattle game, where he went left, came back to his right side, pumped inside, pulled up, threw to Ayuk in the back right into the end zone. We practiced that drill. And he said, Coach, we've repped that. I texted him after the game. He goes, yeah, we've repped that. And Brock's all about reps. He loves the reps. But the key was he listened in reference to, if Ayuk doesn't catch that ball's to the outside in the back right corner of the end zone. Well, Ayuk can't get it, nobody can get it. So he understands where to put the ball, how to put the ball, how to process where he's going with it. And the other thing I teach these guys, and he dialed in on very, very quickly, was he plays urgently but under control. Go fast, but don't wipe out. When you go around the curve at 80 miles an hour, sometimes you need to gear down to make that curve, to use a NASCAR analysis, if you will, and go around there. But then when you get more experience and you understand how to go around the curves and over the bumps and here and there, you just understand how to gear down, how to play within the game is what I call it. So he was, initially just learning all that, coming at him, he was probably like, damn, why am I out here? But he always absorbed it, always was like, thank you, sir, may I have another? May I have another? What else do you have for me? He was always that kind of a young man that even at that young age and going into his sophomore year and junior year, it's what else can I do to get better? What else do you see? And then he'd come home in the offseason from Iowa State. We tweak stuff, work on stuff. And Brock, you still got to do this. You still got to drive. Bring the right side through, your shoulder, your hip. Don't sit back on your haunches when you throw, because he got in a bad habit doing that at Iowa State. So we had to correct that and move that forward. So to answer your question, I know it's a long answer to a short question, but he came out, he was always dialed in on getting better.
Yeah, and I wonder, you talked about Iowa State. I remember watching the Baylor game last year, and they couldn't get it done inside the red zone, and it just wasn't the senior year we were all expecting from Brock Purdy after winning the Fiesta Bowl. How much do you think that cost him in the draft, and what did he come in the lab last year? Did he think he had something to fix, or was it just a case of the offensive coordinator was no longer with Iowa State after that year, and it just wasn't a good fit?
It's just one of those years, Mark. I mean, like I tell guys, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And I think that he realized that he had, it wasn't a great year for a Brock Purdy standard. You can blame this, you can blame that. I would tell you, it is what it is. It's happened. Let's move it forward. Don't ever look back. What can you improve on? I always tell guys, what is it you can improve on, aside from everybody else, that can make you better and move forward from what you came out of? And we talked about 3 or 4 things. He had 3 or 4 things. He was determined to go to that combine practices back in Florida to get situated. So when he got to the combine, guys, a lot of those questions were answered at the combine. And at one point during that senior year, it was just kind of like, I know his dad, Sean, talked to him. I talked to him about, look, just go play. Just go don't overthink it. React. Don't think. You see it, react to it, and move on from it. And I think those are some of the life's lessons, more than any football lessons, Mark, life's lessons that he learned.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that, with all those starts, that's what everybody says, go play, because he's had all these starts, so the moment's not too big for him now with the Niners. But this moment coming up on Sunday is huge. This is on the road. This is a hostile environment. He hasn't had in many road starts. I think he's ready for it, but if I had to put money down, I would probably put it down on the Philadelphia Eagles just because they're the number 1 seed in their defensive line. But how do you like Brock Purdy's chances of punching his ticket back to his hometown and leading the Niners to the Super Bowl here in Arizona?
I like it a lot. I mean, you can talk about big game. Look what he did in Norman. Look what he did in Texas. Look what he did in Kansas State, to go in there with the wind and the crowds and the cold. And I like his chances a lot, Mark, because he understands the game. With all the weapons around him, he knows how to utilize them. I think he's got some really good experience that's prepared him. What I tell a lot of these guys is ignore the noise, stay focused, keep your head up, keep it on a swivel, especially with this team. But I think that he understands what Kyle Shanahan is doing to get him to place the ball at the right time and right place is key. And Brian Griese is his quarterback coach. Brian's got a lot of stuff to rely on. Brian being an ex-quarterback. I think Brian Griese might be one of the most underrated guys in this story about his season, how he's worked with them and what he's doing with Brock. So I think I like him. I like him a lot. Hopefully McCaffrey can last the entire game. But I like the way that Brock's been down this road, but not quite at this speed or tempo. Because the National Football League's probably 2 gears faster than college. But Brock is poised. He understands. He's so dialed in. A lot of that white noise to him is just background noise.
What did your workouts look like as you were getting ready for the NFL? I can't imagine there were as many labs back then. So were you throwing into like trees? How'd you set up your whole situation back then?
Well, we worked out all the time. We'd run in the morning, we'd do our lifting in the afternoon, and then we would go ahead and do our throwing. So we worked hard. I was the precursor of my own lab, getting receivers out, because we had no combine back in those days. So in those days, after my senior year, the scouts, the offensive coordinators, the quarterback coaches, the general managers would come through Manhattan, Kansas, and work me out. So after the season was over, I stayed sharp, throwing the ball, lifting, running. For me, it was just a continuation of the season because they would come through Manhattan, Kansas, and watch us. I also played in the Olympia Challenge Bowl, where the Big 8 take on the Pac-10, up in Seattle in the Olympia Challenge Bowl. We played in the old Kingdom. So there was like 60, 70 scouts there to watch the week of practice. And we took them on in a game. That's when Jack Thompson, I played against Jack Thompson. Sorley was the quarterback for Nebraska and Jack. So we played against each other. So we had a bunch of scouts there that saw me practice all week and saw my game. So the lab I developed years ago, I was doing the agility and all that, precursor to the combine. So the fortunate thing was they were coming through Manhattan, actual coaches, general managers, coordinators, and scouts to watch me work out.
Well, Dan, I think if we gave you a football right now, you could probably still throw it over Camelback Mountain. So thanks so much for your time today.
And you know what, Mark, I appreciate it. And to all the Brock Purdy fans and people that are watching the Brock Mania, the continuation of Brocktober. Number one, you need to understand he is one of the finest, nicest, graceful young men you'll ever meet. He's smart, and he gives you the time of day. He'll give you the shirt off his back if he had to, too. It's just I'm more proud of all these guys, especially Brock, how much of an outstanding young man they are as well. On top of that, not a bad quarterback either.
The Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.